You may begin.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for Lift Every Voice 100 Years of Commemorating Black History. This event is part of our Black History Month celebration and marks a powerful milestone. 100 years since Dr. Carter G. Woodson laid the foundation for what began as Negro History Week and grew into Black History Month as we know it today. It is especially meaningful that one of our first events this season centers on reflection, legacy, and work still ahead. It is my honor to introduce our speaker. You may know her as Dr. K. Wise Whitehead, President of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Dr. Whitehead is a nationally recognized scholar, educator, and public historian whose work reminds us that Black history is not static. It is living, it is evolving, and deeply connected to our responsibility to educate, engage, and advocate. Her scholarship, leadership, and voice continue the very mission Dr. Woodson envisioned, ensuring that Black history is taught with rigor, care, and purpose. Her full bio is actually available on our website, and I encourage you to explore it. But today, we are grateful to learn directly from her insights and reflections. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kay Whitehead.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate having an opportunity to be here. Thank you, Dr. Savoy, and thank you to the Coppin community for welcoming me back to talk about this important milestone. I would like to do two things today in our conversation. So first, I want to share the proclamation that was released yesterday for Black History Month. I think it's important to center it, and then I'll go into my talk giving us the background information. As many of you may know, Negro History Week was launched in 1926 by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. We understand that that wasn't the first time that Black folks were celebrating, uplifting, protecting, promoting, and preserving our history. What Dr. Woodson did is he gave structure to what was already happening in our community. We continue to celebrate Negro History Week into Black History Week when the language changed into Black History Month. And we received the first official proclamation in 1976 during the year of the bicentennial. President George Ford partnered with the Black community and issued the first proclamation. Since then, every single president has given out a proclamation just noting that Black History Month is officially recognized in February and calling on every community, every organization, every business, every university, every school to set aside programming to lift up Black History Month. Last year, we received word that we might not receive a proclamation. At that point, I was 1 month into my presidency, and I said, well, we don't have to wait to be proclaimed. We can proclaim February as Black History Month ourselves. It can come from me as president and ASALH as the organization. So we did. Last year was the first year we proclaimed it. This is year two. We're moving forward with proclaiming it ourselves because we don't wait to be proclaimed. We can proclaim ourselves. We don't wait for anyone to uplift our history. We can do that ourselves. And so the proclamation that I released yesterday reads, in 1926, during the nadir of Black history, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH, the son of formerly enslaved parents, a former sharecropper and miner, and the second Black person to receive a PhD from Harvard University, launched the first Negro History Week. He intentionally chose February because the Black community had already set aside the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln, February 12th, and Frederick Douglass, February 14th, to recognize and celebrate their contributions to emancipation and abolition. The goal of Negro History Week was to study, teach, and promote the significant contributions that Black people had made to American society. From our writers to our inventors, our politicians to our teachers to our artists to our musicians. It was designed to document our lives from American slavery to freedom and to fill in the historical gaps deliberately overlooked, to intentionally miseducate our children. I want to note this is, of course, what Dr. Carter G. Woodson was talking about in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. In 1976, Negro History Week, which by then had evolved into Black History Month, was officially recognized and proclaimed by President Gerald Ford. We are now at a moment where we are celebrating a century of Black history commemorations, 50 years of Negro History Week and 50 years of Black History Month. America is a complicated place. It is, as Dr. Charles H. Long once asserted, a hermeneutical situation in that it is diverse and complex. Its history is both beautiful and bloody. The study of it requires constant and continuous interpretation, simultaneously through our eyes and through the eyes of an oppressive, dominant white culture. We must move beyond both the white gaze and the fragmentation, which is the idea of two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings fighting to exist in one body, that comes from W.B. Du Bois's idea of double consciousness, and into a space where we fully recognize who we are and what we have contributed to this country. We built this country. We tamed the land and we cultivated the crops. Our unpaid labor and the buying and selling of our bodies are at the cornerstone of America and of American capitalism. Our blood is mixed with the soil, and the wind carries forth both our tears of sorrow and our tears of joy. We fought in the wars for democracy abroad and at home. James Baldwin once wrote in an open letter to Bishop Desmond Tutu that the fight for Black freedom makes white freedom possible. Indeed, he notes, our freedom, which we have been forced to buy at such a high price, is the only hope of freedom that they have. To celebrate America at this moment requires us to fully situate ourselves within the narrative, not as a footnote, but as main characters who have helped shape this American experience and the American story. Black history is American history. And as we've done every year since 1926, we will proclaim and celebrate Black History Month. Our 2026 theme is a century of Black history commemorations, and it is fitting for this moment that we take time to look back so we can push back and push forward. We stand in the house of Woodson, and just as he did with the work of so many others, we will uplift our history. We will protect it, we will promote it, and we will preserve it. We will plant our trees of truth, the ones that tell our story, right beside where they are planting the trees of lies, the ones that seek to erase and distort our story. We will teach our children, future generations, how to choose the path of truth and how to stand tall in moments of adversity, how to bring clarity in moments of confusion, and how to choose love instead of hate. Black History Month belongs to us. We do not celebrate because they see us. We celebrate because we see ourselves. We do not ask for permission to center ourselves. We write the stories where we are centered, and then we tell that story. We do not sing songs of freedom because they are playing the music. We sing because we are the music makers, and we carry the songs of our ancestors and bring the music to our people. We do not wait for anyone to write our story. Our history has already been written, as we are the history seekers and the truth speakers. Now, therefore, I, Karsonya Wise Whitehead, the national president of ASALH, on behalf of the Executive Council and the ASALH members, do hereby acknowledge and recognize February 2026 as Black History Month. And we will urge everyone to recognize and observe this month by hosting and are participating in Black History Month activities, and by taking up the shared work of protecting, promoting, and preserving Black history as a significant part of the American story. I wanted to start there because that is the proclamation that went out. It is important to note that we have not received an official proclamation. We have moved forward. Black History Month is into day 2. It has already been proclaimed. When we talk about lifting up every voice, through the last 100 years, we are not doing it to discount what happened up until 1926. We understand 1526 as the arrival. If you use that with Spanish South Carolina, 1619 Jamestown, Virginia, and everything that was done in this country to significantly legitimize the oppression and the use of unpaid labor of Black people through the American slavery system, all the way up and into and through the Civil War and into Reconstruction and into the nadir of Black history. It is not discounting that. We're just using 1926 as a marker. At this moment, as we are celebrating a century of Black History Commemorations and the 250th anniversary of the United States Declaration of Independence, it's important to note it's not the 250th anniversary of the country. It's the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, when they declared that they were going to be an independent nation, and then they were fighting to be recognized, but they had not yet been recognized. I do not take it lightly that we are in the middle of yet another fight for our lives, for our democracy, for our freedoms. In June of 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia, who was a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses and the Continental Congress, and he was someone who owned enslaved people, he publicly opposed slavery, yet he held over 60 people in this system. He introduced a resolution of independence, an act of the Second Continental Congress, and it declared the 13 colonies to be independent of the British Empire. It was expanded upon by Thomas Jefferson, also a lifelong owner of more than 600 people, who even upon his death only freed a few people, and most were members of the Hemings family, including two of his children with Sally Hemings, a young enslaved girl that he then took as his, quote, wife and mistress, unofficially, of course. What was taken out of the Declaration is actually more interesting than what was left in. Benjamin Franklin and John Adams reviewed Jefferson's draft. They preserved its original form, but they struck out passages that they thought would likely be met with controversy or skepticism. Passages that blamed King George III for the transatlantic slave trade, and passages that blamed all the people of Britain for supporting their king in perpetuating the slave trade, blaming the people for those who were in power. It should sound familiar to who do we hold accountable in this moment. These passages were removed to appease the Southern colonies, namely South Carolina and Georgia. The document was written for multiple audiences: the king, the colonists, and the world. They were trying to rally the troops, win foreign allies, and announce the creation of a new country. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume the powers, among the powers of the earth, the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. They go on to write what we're all familiar with. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Writing this, even though they were holding people enslaved, but they were declaring their independence, their rights, without extending them to the people that they were keeping in this system. What gets me is that last paragraph in the Declaration of Independence, where they write, the history of the present king of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, and all having in direct object the establishment of absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And then what they did here is they outlined their grievances. They stated that because the king, through a system of repeated injuries, through a system of not respecting them, not recognizing them, not seeing them, not giving them full representation for their taxation, they said, we will break away and be independent. And these are the reasons why. They laid out their grievances to a candid world. I think there's a lesson here in talking about what can we do as we continue to push back and push forward. At the same time that they were establishing their right to be free and independent, slavery was becoming deeply entrenched in the American colonies. This fight for freedom from Britain coexisted with the fight to expand and profit from slavery at home. 150 years later, after the ending of the Revolutionary War in 1783, the abolishment of the transatlantic slave trade in 1808, and we know it continued illegally up until 1867. I'm thinking about, of course, the ship Clotilda. The brutal Civil War from 1861 to 1865 that led to the Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th Amendment that ended slavery but also launched the mass industrial prison complex, the 14th Amendment that established our citizenship and our protection of our civil rights and civil liberties, and the 15th Amendment that protected Black men's right to vote, the rise of the KKK, and the continued harassment, lynching, beatings, and killings of Black people by white people, it is in this moment that Dr. Carter G. Woodson, along with his colleagues, rose up in 1915 at the Chicago State Fair and said, we've got to do something. We've got to found an organization that is completely dedicated to preserving and protecting and promoting our history. Not just an organization that's talking about our advancement or our legal rights or our political rights, but an organization whose express purpose is about holding and keeping our history. That is ASALH. And from there, Negro History Week. We come from a legacy of survivors, and we have survived the very worst of what this country has to offer. We have just come out of the national holiday of Dr. King, a man whose very legacy has been co-opted and twisted to fit a narrative that thrives on our oppression, thrives on our anticipatory obedience, and thrives on our silence. They quote from I Have a Dream, but not from his speech, Staying Awake During the Great Revolution. In 1959, in a commencement address at Morehouse College, Dr. King told the graduating class that the greatest challenge facing them was to remain awake, alert, and creative through this great revolution. Dr. King said, change is happening. It's already happening and it will happen. And you've got three things you have to do. You got to be awake and be aware of the changes that are happening. This is not a time for sleeping at this moment. You've got to know that changes are happening so quickly. If you don't keep your eyes open and remain aware, you're going to miss it. Second, he said that you have to have a system of alertness where you are not being triggered emotionally, but you're being triggered into action. So when something happens, you're not simply reacting, you're being both proactive and reactive, whereas you are already prepared to move and then you're moving as things happen. And then he says you've got to remain creative because the future of who we are is uniquely tied to the ways in which we tell our story and the ways in which we capture this moment, which is why the work of musicians and poets and artists, it is so important that we are documenting what is happening in real time as we go through these times. Dr. King said the country was moving toward change. And if they continue to apply just the right amount of pressure, then there will be a revolution in the social and political structure of our world on the question of the equality of man. In order to move things along, we have to apply just the right amount of pressure. When you think about this moment, at this century point, are we applying the right amount of pressure? We are watching as placards and billboards are coming down in Philadelphia. We're watching what is happening with our beloved Blacksonian, which is a Smithsonian down in Washington, D.C. We're watching what is happening with the continued assault when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. We watch what happened with the rollback of the language that could be used in federal documents. Words like black and woman and diversity and racism and white supremacy were all banned from these sites. We watched with the book banning campaign that continued relentlessly through Trump 1 and through the the Biden administration that saw over 10,000 books, primarily written by or about Black people, were removed from state curricula, were removed from bookshelves in schools, but should have then set us on fire to make sure we are buying these books, collecting these books, and sharing these books with young people. Are we applying the right amount of pressure to bring about a revolution in the social and political structure of our world on the question of the equality of all? Now, the speech Dr. King gave was only 3 years after the Montgomery bus boycott, where there was a sense that the political and social protest campaigns would actually change the laws and the hearts and minds of people. This is where we see the disconnect. Policies, practices, laws, and procedures changing does not change hearts and minds. In fact, in 1968, with the release of the Kerner Commission, which was led by Otto Kerner, which was called upon by Lyndon Baines Johnson after what was going on in 1967. So if we go back and we look at the continuum of history, the March on Washington, the Birmingham Children's Campaign, the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, the assassination of JFK, that was 1963 that all that took place. By the time you got to 1967, which was after he had already pushed through the Civil Rights Act of 1964, after the Voting Rights Act of 1965, by 1967, communities were on fire. Change was not happening fast enough in our communities. And Lyndon Baines Johnson wanted to know why. Like, why is it that I feel like I have given? I'm paraphrasing LBJ. He's like, look, I've given all I can give to this community. Why are they still not satisfied and happy? What exactly do they want? Well, when Otto Kerner and his team set out and began to interview Black folks in their community, what they found with the Kerner Commission is that it's not about policies, practices, laws, and procedures. We've got to get to the heart of what is happening, because that doesn't change hearts and minds. You can bring about what you call equality in pay, which did not happen. You can bring about what happens when you put the same resources into every community, which did not happen. You can bring about this level of equality and equity in the school systems, the ones that are both in our community and outside of our community, which didn't happen. But that does not change hearts and minds. That's what we're seeing today. It's that ever-growing nugget through white supremacy that has continued to grow unchecked, that we're seeing the roots of that. So a few years before, in 65, just right a few years after the march in Selma, Dr. King was asked a question that we talk about all the time. When the people, the crowd, wanted to know, how long will it take to see social justice? And I have to separate at this moment Dr. King, the scholar, from Boston, right, from Morehouse, from Dr. King, the theologian. Because the question of social justice, Dr. King answered it as a theologian. I think we have to wrestle with answering this as academics, as parents, as teachers, as community members. What does it look like for us in this struggle to achieve social justice? Dr. King said, I come to say to you this afternoon, however difficult the moment, however frustrating the hour, it will not be long, because truth crushed to earth will rise again. That's a theologian speaking, not an academician, not a parent, not someone who's out here as a community activist. That's theology. He goes on, how long? Not long, because no lie can live forever. That's a theologian speaking. Because we know that in America is built on nothing but lies, blood, brutality, violence. I mean, that's the heart and soul of what America is built on. It is a land that they sought to tame, even permit killing, murdering, poisoning the indigenous people that were already living here. And that continued to build. Dr. King goes on. How long? Not long, because you shall reap what you sow. Again, theology talking. Because if reaping what you sow is exactly what we're waiting for, when does that happen? When do we see the things that we have sown into the ground, right? The seeds of justice that we have planted, the seeds of love that we have planted, the seeds of work in our community we have planted. When does that begin to come forth? He ends when they say, how long? This is the crowd again. How long, Dr. King? He said, not long, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Now, what is interesting about King saying this in 65 was it was actually said for the first time in 1853. So Theodore Parker was an abolitionist and a Unitarian minister. So he was fighting to try to end slavery back in 1853. And he wrote, I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divide it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice. 1853, Unitarian minister and abolitionist working to end American slavery. I'm sure that the arc is bending toward justice. 1865, Dr. King, in the middle of the modern civil rights movement, when we're being met with the lynchings, met with the jailings, met with the beatings, met with the dogs, met with the water. And he's saying, yes, it bends toward justice. My question that I wrestle with here in 2026 is how long before justice will actually get here? Like, how much more bending has to be done before we get to the place of justice? Or it's just simply theology. Like, here we are in a century of Black History commemorations, and we're still waiting for the arc to bend all the way to justice. Now, we are doing the work to help bend it, but my question is justice like fool's gold? And bear with me here, because maybe justice is a place we actually won't ever get to, right? It's like that end of the rainbow pot of gold that you expect to find. Maybe there is no end to the fight for justice in this country. Maybe given the environmental issues, given the economic issues, given the political issues, given the social issues and ills, given the educational issues, given the health issues, maybe there is no end to this ongoing push for justice. Maybe instead it's taking up the work to just bend it a little bit more for the time that you are here. Maybe it's like Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. Like, you're never going to finish the symphony in your lifetime. You're just adding to the music while you're here. For Dr. King, that work was about pushing this country and moving the country forward. I wonder if people who quote Dr. King today, and we saw that on Dr. King's holiday, I'm not sure if they would have supported him when he was here. Dr. King, by the time he was assassinated in 1968, was one of the most hated men in America. Like, his approval ratings had fallen almost 60%. Like, they've fallen every year since 65. They just got worse and worse. It became much more difficult for Dr. King to be able to rally the crowds because they kept asking the eternal question, when does change happen? Like, you're showing back up to organize in our community in 66. We organized in 65. Like, we organized in 64. We saw the churches blown up in 63. We're still organizing and fighting for the same thing. How long? Well, not long is a hard answer. We stand here at the century at the crossroads of freedom and equality because it is an interesting time in American history, because we are at a place where, if we are truly looking at how the moral arc is bending, then we have to be honest about how far it is bent in the opposite direction. Like, I don't know if we took our hands off the plow. I don't know if we looked away. I don't know if we stopped pushing, but something has happened. But we have been moving in a different direction. We have not yet gotten to that place here at a century where the valleys have been exalted, where the hills and mountains have been made low, where the rough places have been made plain and the crooked places have been made straight. Dr. King once said, the universe is on the side of justice. I make the argument here today at a century of Black History commemorations that justice is taking a long time to get here. I am the product of the Jim Crow generation. I am Gen X. I was raised by parents who survived one of the most tumultuous times in American history, the civil rights years. They remember where they were when that iconic picture of Emmett Till's body in the casket after his mother, Mamie Till, said, leave the casket open so the world can see what they have done to my baby. They remember where they were when that photo came in the mail on the cover of Jet magazine. My parents remember what was happening on the day that they heard Dr. King had been assassinated, what they were doing. My grandmother remembers where she was when she took a look at the Emmett Till picture and heard about what happened to Emmett Till. So you're talking about centuries here of dealing with ongoing genetic trauma. My great grandmother, I once asked her before she passed away, what was that moment for her? When they said you can't sleep anymore at night, things have completely shifted. My great grandmother said she's never had, the time she was here, she said she never had a completely comfortable, peaceful night of sleep. She said when she was 6 months old, her father, my great great grandfather, was shot and killed by the Klan in the front door of our home. And she said, for as long as the family lived there, nobody ever slept well again. Generations of trauma. My parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents, and going back to my great great grandparents, they understand that justice was never and will never be blind in this country. But like Dr. King, and James Baldwin and Ida B. Wells and Mary McLeod Bethune and Langston Hughes, to just say a few, they believe, as do I, that we too sing America, and we will reshape and save this nation. I am gonna say I wonder sometimes, what does saving this nation actually look like? If Dr. King definitely said that he was concerned that he integrated his people into a burning house, what does saving the nation mean if you're inside of a house that's burning? Do you stay in and fight the fire from inside the house? Or do you step out and let it all burn down and we rebuild over the ashes? These are big questions that we have to look at. My dad once said that the problem with America is that we quote Dr. King when it is expedient, but we do not study his words. We celebrate Black History Month when it's February, but we do not uplift, protect, promote, and preserve Black History 365 or 366. Dr. King was a revolutionary because he believed that racism, poverty, and militarism were the three major evils facing our society. He fought against capitalism, the Vietnam War, military spending, and oppression. He advocated for unions, poverty eradication, and economic equality. Dr. Woodson believed that racism, poverty, and the military, he was specifically talking about police officers, that they were the things that were coming at our community. He added a fourth pillar that Dr. King did not touch on. The fourth pillar for Dr. Carter G. Woodson is that if you don't know your history, then you don't know what you have contributed. You don't know the value of your contributions. If you don't know who you are, then you wait for other people to define you. So it's not just racism, not just poverty, not just militarism, but the miseducation is that fourth pillar. That is the work that has gone into Black History Month, Negro History Week over a century, trying to deal specifically with that miseducation pillar. Dr. King did not die for us to be free. I try to use every platform that I have to just put this out. Did not die for us to be free. A wicked and evil system worked together to assassinate him. We are working both within and against a wicked and evil system that plotted to assassinate Dr. King, whose hands are bloody with the assassination of Medgar Evers, JFK, RFK, Malcolm X. I mean, we are talking about a system that conspired to make sure that Fannie Lou Hamer couldn't have children, the Mississippi appendectomy. This is what we are fighting against. We cannot ever let them forget the brutal history of our nation. Slavery is not to be forgotten. It is supposed to be remembered so we can learn the lessons. Reconstruction is not to be forgotten. It's supposed to be remembered so we learn the lessons. The last 100 years are not to be forgotten, and to be remembered so we can learn the history. It is something that we have to imagine a different type of society. Dr. King was interviewed by Playboy magazine. Alex Haley did the interview. I always laugh when I think about this, when we say, there are articles there. But Alex Haley asked Dr. King, what is it that would save our community? I want to lift this up because it's similar to what Dr. Woodson wrote about, what Du Bois was talking about, what they were arguing about with Booker T. Washington and William Trotter back during the 1920s. It's the same thing. Dr. King said what would save us, what would lift us up, is a $50 billion federal aid program for Black folks. Reparations is what we call it today. Du Bois and Woodson and Trotter and Washington said it's about the government pouring the money into our community that they owed us for our unpaid labor. Dr. King said if we put this $50 billion in here, it would lead to a spectacular decline in school dropouts, family breakups, crime rates, illegitimacy, swollen relief rolls, rioting, and other social evils. He was fighting for us and against this system with every breath that he had. That's a century. That's what we've been doing, fighting for our rights, fighting to be seen, fighting to be heard with every breath that we had. Every year, every theme for Negro History Week into Black History Month has been about us fighting for the right to be seen and to be heard, fighting for the remembrance of who we are, fighting against the miseducation of both our children and our community. 1967, Dr. King said, a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. In 67, he said, the evils of capitalism are as real as the evils of militarism and racism, cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power. 65, the price that America must pay for the continued oppression of the Negro and other minority groups is the price of its own destruction. 67 again, white Americans must recognize that justice for Black people cannot be achieved without radical changes in the structure of our society. 63, we know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. 67, again, we have deluded ourselves into believing the myth that capitalism grew and prospered out of the Protestant ethic of hard work and sacrifices. Capitalism was built on the exploitation of Black slaves and continues to thrive on the exploitation of the poor, both Black and white, both here and abroad. There's a place between who we want to be and who we are. It is a difficult, sobering place because it forces us to look at what has been done and then challenge the system to do better. This is that moment. At a century of Black History commemorations, this is the moment. This is the moment where we have to dive into our history, into our struggles, and into our stories. This is the moment that we scream about how our lives matter, even if what we see around us are nothing but constant reminders that this system does not think that we do. We live in a country where our Black bodies have always been valued, even though they told us our Black lives did not matter. What we know to be true And what we should be teaching our children is that our history is the history. It is through our tears, our sweat, our blood, our sacrifice, our struggle, our faith, our love, our laughter, our music, and our humanity that you can trace the American story. Langston Hughes, in his poem, Let America Be America, again wrote, I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery's scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek. Oh, yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me. And yet I swear this oath, America will be. His vision of and for America is my vision as well. No matter how long it takes or what needs to be sacrificed along the way, America will be America for us. This is the moment. And like Angela Davis once said, we must sink deep into the moment, husbanding the idea, this delight, and hoarding it, because it will be short lived. And even though we know how many of us have died for this American dream, we must walk into this moment confident and unafraid because somewhere buried deep in our genes, we are familiar with this fight for freedom. We know what it feels like, even though we are not expecting it to happen right now. We are the descendants of those who chose to survive. This month should be a month of reflection for what we have been through and pride for what we have overcome. We should push back against the work that has been done to transform this month into a capitalistic hodgepodge of I have a dream, Black History Month mattress sales, and Black History Month tennis shoes, and Black History Month t-shirts from companies that don't recognize us any time of the year, Black History Month products on the shelves of stores that we should be boycotting. That's designed to confuse us rather than give us the clarity that we need to understand that we are the descendants of survivors, because we are. This is a deliberate movement, a revolt against what they call the myth of time. We are, I am sad to say, out of time. It is time for a revolution of not just hearts and minds, but of policies, practices, and procedures. Time is neutral, but it has never been on our side. We must grab it, bend it, and shape it to our will. This is what they did in 1776. And this is what we have done time and time again when we claimed our freedom. Dr. Woodson did it in 1926, and I'm telling you that we need to do it today. So as we celebrate the beginning of Black History Month 2026, a century of Black History commemorations, we celebrate it by arguing, yelling, screaming, stomping our foots, and saying with everything in us, Black history is American history, and that without our story, there is no story to tell. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that powerful lecture. If anyone have questions, please type it in the chat. But I had so many questions and I was taking the opportunity to write them down. You pose a provocative question, and that is whether justice in America is like fool's gold. Something we chase, but we never fully reach.
Yeah.
So if justice is not the destination, because I'm thinking that's the justice in my head, I'm thinking that's the destination. But if justice is not the destination, what does ethical and meaningful struggle look like for this single generation?
Thank you for that question, because I wrestle with this, and it pains me to talk about this. And the reason why I argue it that it's fool's gold, it reminds me, and this is a Gen X example, if you allow me to use it, but it's the classic example of Charlie Brown trying to kick the football. And every time he goes to kick it in good faith, it's moved every single time. Even though he steps back up, he knows it's been moved before. He has such a powerful belief that this time is going to be the time. It's not going to be moved. So he tries again. That's how justice is as fools go. We were told that justice was around trying to end American slavery. We just get slavery ended in this country, as so many of our ancestors believed, that we just have to end slavery. and then we'll have this equality we've been working for. Well, we fought a war. And Frederick Douglass said, well, if you can get colored men, get them a musket on their shoulder, a uniform on their back, then you can never enslave them again. They will fight for their freedom with everything they have because freedom was the end. Well, the Civil War ended, and we still did not have our justice. Still did not have our freedom. The 13th Amendment was ratified on December 6, 1865. That did not give us anything but the ending of legalized slavery. It did not give us our rights. Our rights were stripped away from us with Dred Scott in 1857. We did not have those rights. Our rights had to be given back to us, restored with the 14th Amendment in 1868. That was civil rights and civil liberties. And that still was not enough. We got our rights and we're like, okay, so now we have our rights. We can go and we can vote and be a part of this country. We still needed the 15th Amendment, right, to come along to make sure that Black men can get to the ballots, not to give them the right to vote, because they had that through the 14th Amendment. We had it through our citizenship, but we had to protect them so they wouldn't have to go in and do all kind of tests and have to pay all kind of money that they did not have. We saw Black men go in and elect over 600 Black men into positions throughout the South. Whether we're sending in the first two senators, I'm thinking of Herring Rebels, whether we had mayors, dog catchers, comptrollers, Black men were serving. So what happened after that was stripping us and disenfranchising us and then doing legalized segregation. Here comes, after sharecropping, here comes Plessy in 1896. So now we're back running again. Every time we thought we had reached that place of justice, of equity, of equality, that football's been snatched from us. And we have seen it since then. We saw the building of the Black middle class. We know primarily that was built through these, what they call the good government jobs, right? We saw that stripped away just last year with Doge, when 318,000 Black women lost their job over a 3-month period. If the system should have been set on fire, that should have been that moment, because we know that Black women are the canaries in this American minefield. And if 318,000 Black women can be fired, let go, pushed into leaving, and the country continues on, then we know the burning that is happening. So that's that idea of fool's gold. I don't know what the final destination is, because it's not just about being able to vote. It's not just about being able to buy a house. It's not just about being able to go to college, because that doesn't change hearts and minds. When we saw the rising up with the Tea Party, hearts and minds, leading into MAGA, hearts and minds. That's what we're looking at now. The inhumane treatment, you can't do a law to stop the inhumane treatment. You can stop them from doing it in public, but that didn't stop them from what? Killing Black men on camera. I'm thinking about Black Lives Matter 1.0 and Black Lives Matter 2.0. I separate them because Black Lives Matter 1.0, if we're thinking about Trayvon and Tamir and Freddie Gray, 2.0 is what, dealing with George Floyd and beyond. In both those situations, we thought the destination then was we want Black men and Black women and children to stop being killed by the police. Well, that now seems to be a small issue in comparison to what's happening now. Because what they've circled back around to now is back to birthright citizenship, which is a direct line back to us. So I call it fool's gold, because I'm like, I don't even know what justice looks like in this country anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, perfectly said. You you also stated plainly that justice has never been blinded in this country. So, as an educator myself, how do educators and even historians continue to tell the truth honestly without resorting to despair, but also without offering false hope or comfort?
So it's interesting. Someone asked me this weekend after, because I run a freedom school here in Baltimore City. Every Saturday at my institute, I offer a free course as the ASALH president teaching Black history. Anyone can come for 2 hours, because I think that in order for us to plant the trees of truth, we have to know it. I tell people just being Black doesn't mean you know Black history. You know the Black experience. I do not take that away from you, but you got to be able to talk about the actual historical understanding of who we are. You know this as an educator. Someone asked me this weekend, she said, how do you sleep at night? After I had a very difficult lecture on the road to and from the Brown decision. And I thought about Viola Davis and How to Get Away with Murder. When somebody asked her, how do you sleep at night? She's like, oh, I sleep on good sheets now. I think about that because we're trying to get rest and trying to restore our spirits in a system that's beating it down. Like I think that idea of revolutionary rest for Black women and others is a powerful notion. So, us getting centered and trying to help ourselves understand that what we're doing now is we are gardeners at this moment. Like we're planting seeds for trees that will probably never give us shade. We will probably not be alive by the time these trees come to full growth. We know that because we now sit under the trees of Ida. We sit under the trees of Zora. Zora, who died penniless, when she had no headstone when she died because there was no money. We're sitting under the trees of Fannie, Fannie Lou, who died penniless. Like we're sitting under the trees from the seeds that they planted. So I try to keep very honest with myself that we are gardeners at this moment. That's what keeps me going, telling people you're part of a larger continuum of our history. And every generation just has to push the baton a little bit farther down the road. Justice may come. I just don't think justice is going to come anytime soon. Doesn't mean we don't continue to plant the seeds to be prepared when it finally gets here.
Oh, that's a good perspective. That brings me back, or I want to return to the conversation. You mentioned Dr. King warning about integrating into a burning house, and asks what it means to save a nation that is on fire. So, from your perspective, is the work staying inside to fight the fire? Because I know that you say you were struggling with, this too. So, is the work to stay inside to fight the fire, or stepping out to imagine something entirely new?
Thank you for this question. And I tell people, just so you'll know, I am truly, I'm a pessimist with optimist leanings, right? So I like to imagine that I get to a place where I can be more optimistic because the question at the heart of that is, can America be saved?
Mhm.
And I don't think that it can be saved in its current iteration. The America that we knew prior to January 20th of 2025 does not exist anymore. That America is gone.
Yeah.
The protections that we had in place, that the safeguards that we were there, that had there, the barriers that were set up, all of that has been decimated, has been trampled on, has been destroyed in our very faces. This is not something that we are hearing, not something that's being passed as a rumor. We can see it in front of us. That America doesn't exist anymore. So the America that we exist in now is not America we should be fighting to save, because America is supposed to be, even though it's never been a complete democracy, it's supposed to be closer to democracy than to an authoritarian regime. And I tell people we got to be clear about what are we fighting for. We can't be fighting to save this because it can't be. It is burning down to the ground. So the question is, how do we keep our humanity, keep our joy, keep our sense of family, our sense of love, our music, keep our history so we can rebuild on the other side? I like what someone said in the chat about how thinking about the rise, in terms of our connection with our roots as African people. That is work that has to be done. I think we have to do the work of remembrance. We are in a very difficult situation. And it's not just we as Black people. I'm saying we as the collective, very, very, in general, but specifically because we know something that my Nana used to say, and I know she's not the only person that said it, but Nana used to always say, when white folks get a cold, Black folks get pneumonia. And then my mom picked up on that and said, well, when white folks get pneumonia, we get COVID. Like it's anything that kind of splashes in the white community, it becomes a drain on us. So what do we want to have built on the other side? Can we make sure that we have people at the table who are speaking with our best interests at heart? If we have an election, I mean, it is scary, Dr. Savoy, to even use the word if, not when. I just like to be realistic. If we have an election and it's not rigged, making sure that everyone understands that all elections have consequences. And we need not just the 77 or so million people that voted as for the Democratic candidate for Sister Kamala, but the 90 million that did not vote. Like, we need everybody to come to the polls and actually elect people, as we're seeing in elections around the country. We're seeing Democrats sweeping the elections, but how do we keep the pressure on to help people to recognize and realize, if we have an election, we got to show up and we got to put people into positions that actually have our best interests at heart. Doesn't mean politicians are not going to be crooked. I'm not saying that. But I take a crooked politician before January 19th versus the politicians today every single time. It's one thing for me to be like, oh, are you like signing bills to build stuff in my community? That's a different discussion than, are you stripping me of my rights? Those are two different levels of concern.
You have provided a, a we have to think in this space. And so you provided some hard truths, um, um, where we are currently now and how to think. So in the chat, Ephraim said, personally, I feel the rise of Africa will give us Black people as a collective a better voice in America and worldwide. What do you think about this? Should Black History Month also include where we are from? And do you think this will be relevant to the fight as a whole?
Absolutely. I think that when we look at our freedom schools and we're teaching about Black people, we do have to go back to come forward. We don't just start with the arrival 1526 or 1619. We start with Ivan Van Sertima's. They came before Columbus. We start with the fact that African people, and I'm thinking about the continent, not specific countries, in terms of the autonomy, the economic autonomy, the educational autonomy that existed on the continent before we got here. I agree with you. It has to connect. Black History Month is not just celebrated here in America. It is also celebrated in Ghana. It's celebrated in Kenya, to name just two places. There's a small collective in South Africa that celebrates Black History Month. The question is, how do we do this connection between Black History Month here in the lower 48? I'm not thinking about Hawaii or Alaska at this moment, but the lower 48, to connect with Black History Month happening now in Ontario, if they continue, because they did celebrate last year. I don't know about this year, to connect with what's happening in Brazil for Black History Month, to connect with what's happening in Italy right now for Black History Month. How do we find ways to connect all of these networks to help people to realize this is not just a small struggle with us? This is an international struggle around the global humanization of Black people on this planet.
Thank you. As we mark a century of Black History commemoration, today your lecture reminds us that this work has never been about comfort or closure. And from Dr. Carter G. Woodson, insistence on preserving Black history, to the unanswered warnings of Kerner's Commission, to generational trauma carried from Black families, we are confronted with a difficult truth: justice has never arrived on its own. Mm-hmm. So perhaps the work that is before us is not to complete the arc, as you say, but to bend it, deliberately, courageously, and responsibly. And during the time that we are here, knowing that others will continue to work after us. So I would just like to thank you so much, Dr. K. Whitehead, for trusting us both with your scholarship and story, and for reminding us that Black history is not just what we remember, it is actually what we are accountable for. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I also want to definitely remind everyone that Coppin State University, the African American History Committee, has curated some amazing events. Tomorrow, we have I'll Make Me a World with Dr. Jarvis Giddings, in collaboration, Coppin State and Pratt Library, and your moderator for that is, yes, Dr. K. Whitehead. So I need you all to go over there now and register. You can actually register in on our link. So just click on that scan the QR code, and we can see her again to discuss this powerful book I'll Make Me a World. We'll also have copies of that book here at Coppin State University. And we have so much more planned for you and some more Centennial Speaker Series. So I look forward to you continuing joining with us. Thank you so much, Dr. K. Whitehead. And
Thank you
Sorrel.
so much. Thank you, Sora. I put in the chat if people are interested in the Saturday school that they can email me.
Okay.
We would love to have you join us. And I do Saturday school teachings on my radio show every Friday. The show is every day from 3 to 6 p.m. But on Fridays in particular, at 5:30, I do a little Freedom School teaching every single week. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the program.
Thank you. I'm just trying to read.